Did you know that in the 18th century, spiders were a very important part of cooking? And I don't mean the spiders crawl around in your yard. I mean the spider pot, which is a three-legged pot that is used to cook on open hearth. And cooking in the 18th century was hard work. And a taste of history, I will keep true to those early American ways, using spider pots, resting in open flames, as I create everything from sauces to side dishes to main courses. There were no microwave ovens or frozen dinners. Meal preparation revolved around the hearth and keeping the fire going. Did you know moving pots in and out of the fire was my only way of temperature control? It takes a strong back to do this type of cooking, but I come from a sturdy Hessian heritage, so I can take it. Growing up in the Black Forest of Germany, my grandfather taught me how to make amazing meals in front of an open hearth fire. When I came to the United States, I took those secrets with me to Philadelphia, the city tavern. So it's no surprise to me that Philadelphia, which was the second largest English-speaking city in the world, had so much sophistication when it came to food. This is the original spot where Jefferson, Washington, and Adams would come after a hard day of debates to enjoy a hearty meal and a strong ale. Huzzah! For over a quarter century, I've kept this tradition alive. This season, on A Taste of History, I'll prepare a meal for the troops at Washington's Crossing. Visit Thomas Jefferson's Monticello and Thomas Jefferson's kitchen. Years have inspired for this moment, and now it's finally happened. Actually cook in the third president's personal kitchen. This is the moment I've been waiting for. Breaking in a new stove is always an exciting thing, but breaking in Thomas Jefferson recreation is just
you don't get that chance very often.
No, history's been made.
That's right.
Stole his vegetable gardens. It's just so much to see. You can spend a day here, plus much more. So step back with me to 18th century America and savor the great flavors and A Taste of History. Welcome to the 18th century. I got my fire going, I got the food here. I want to explain to you, the 18th century was much more sophisticated than we know today. From the farm to the table, as fresh as possible. No preservatives, no additives. Today's recipe is inspired by Martha Washington, the first president's first lady. She was quite a unique first lady in the sense that she wrote a book in 1753, and she incorporated a lot of seafood together with fowl, as we're going to do today at her Martha Washington inspired turkey stew that is served with fried oysters and fried leek and a lot of root vegetables. The important thing is to know that turkeys of that size were very common in the 18th century. Outside of Philadelphia, there was sightings of flocks up to 5,000 turkey that size. This happens to be a 48-pound turkey. What this recipe calls for is the leg of the turkey. So here you would want to take the leg off. For this particular recipe, you would take the skin off the turkey as well, but obviously you can buy that in most anywhere you can get the turkey leg already deboned and deskinned. Cut it through here. This one would make great soup or great roasting. And the chunks, you want to be very generous. Obviously, you can make them bigger, smaller, it depends. That's the kind of right size that I like for this particular recipe. And just marinate it in ale. This happens to be George Washington's ale that he's made, and we have the recipe from the New York Public Library. So basically what I do here is I have the beer, I have some rosemary, I have some shallots and some garlic that I cut really big pieces. And voila, goes in there. Voila. You want to put no salt into this mixture, because salt will make your turkey dry. And basically, once you have it like that, it should go in your refrigerator for at least 4 hours, but I recommend overnight preparation, gets more flavor. Once the turkey has been marinated, you want to take it out of its marinade. Salt and pepper. I use a little white pepper here, just for not to show any sparks. A little bit of salt. And then all I really do is just put it in all-purpose flour, just like that. Very important step of this recipe is once you've finished with the marinade, discard it, please. There's many cookbooks that tell you not to. I prefer that you do not have it around. Now, obviously, in the 18th century tradition, I use a spider, which I make nice and hot, as you can see here. Put a little butter into it. I want a lot of heat in there, because what I want to do, I want to get the turkey beautiful, nice and golden brown on both sides. That's very important for the flavor. Also, it's important that you use AP flour, not cake flour, because AP flour will help thicken in the sauce. Just about like that. Obviously, I have already one pan ready that we're going to use, and I'm going to show you quick the real trick, and it's really the beauty of the 18th century. And the beauty of the 18th century is because they had no refrigeration, they had no canned goods, there was no airlines. What did they have to do? Look here what I had to do. We are obviously using today, we have onion, we have rutabaga, we have carrot, we have celeriac, and we have turnips, which are basically root vegetables that the 18th century had to offer plenty because they would last all winter long in the root cellars. So you have turnip, you have the celeriac, you have the rutabaga, and you have the parsnip and onion that are all the beautiful vegetables the 18th century had to offer. The turkey that I already pre-fried, I'll just stick it in, and then the trick comes, red wine, sherry, and you can put a little beer into it if you like. You don't have to. I prefer a little bit of the ale into the recipe. Little red wine. And we have a little bit of sherry for extra flavor. Sherry was used a lot in 18th century cooking, so was Madeira for this matter. And now all I do is I put this down on the fire. I want to make sure that the fire is nice and even. I don't want to get it too hot, but I got to have enough heat there to be able to sear the vegetables. You see how the turkey itself, this is how you want to brown it. You want to get the turkey nice and brown. And all I'm going to do here, you see one thing that people never realize, look how quick. I just put it on the fire and already it's reducing down. All I need to do is cook the root vegetable about 8 minutes approximately. So basically what I'm doing right now, I'm reducing the root vegetables, which are basically 80 to 87% water. I add in my turkey, and then I top it off with a little sherry, a little red wine, and potentially some beer or just some chicken stock, whatever you feel like it. I already made a brown sauce called a demi-glace, but any brown sauce would work because there's so much flavor in there. I'm adding the brown sauce in a little bit once the vegetables are reduced some more, so I get a nice flavor from the different root vegetables that makes this dish so delicious. So I'm going to let this simmer about half hour. A slow fire would work. Actually, you could do this in a crock pot. Or better, if you have an 18th century kitchen like me today, just follow me. See how it's done. I'm just going to get started on the next ingredients for this great recipe, which is the cornmeal fried oysters. And ironically, most people look at me when I say oysters in Philadelphia. Yes, the Delaware was full of oysters, a lot of oyster beds around. Not only oysters, but also shrimp and salmon. And it was used a lot in 18th century cooking. Matter of fact, people say the streets in Philadelphia are paved with oyster shells, and that's no exaggeration.
Oysters were so plentiful on the streets of Philadelphia during the 1700s that they were sold with a slice of bread as a favorite snack. The oysters came from the Delaware Bay, where ships brought their bounty daily up the Delaware River to Philadelphia's wharves. The oysters were lifted using long tongs to reach the oyster beds. The oystering industry in New Jersey grew over time to the point that by the late 1800s, there were over 300 dredge boats and 3,000 oystermen shipping 90 rail cars a day of oysters from Bivalve, New Jersey.
And Philadelphians loved their oysters. They ate them raw, they ate them stewed, they ate them fried, and they ate it with chickens and salads. There were probably more places to get oysters in Philadelphia. They were the pizzerias of their time.
Although eventually the oyster beds were depleted by overharvesting and a deadly virus, there is still a yearly celebration in Bivalve to commemorate the rich history of the oyster there.
I'm an oyster toadfish. I'm a native fish to this area. You'll find me a lot in oyster reefs in the Delaware Bay.
I have been a pirate since 1764. I think I look pretty good for my age.
Oystering has been a critical industry here in South Jersey and the Delaware Bay. Would you like to hold that? Oyster's a soft-bodied animal. It has a hard shell.
Wow. These are just painted oyster shells that I found down here at the shell pile. I figured I could do something neat with them. And I love oysters, yeah.
This one happens to be a camelback. There are many different oysters available. What I do with the oysters is really plain. You just kind of flour, egg wash, and cornmeal. Cornmeal again was something that was held very easy as a staple in the larder, and so was commonly used many, many times. So the next step is the cornmeal fried oyster, which is really simple. In a sense, all you do is AP flour, you have a little egg wash, and then you put it in just regular store-bought cornmeal that you bread them in. It's the cornmeal that gives unique flavor because it gets really crunchy on the outside. So the oysters, I already breaded with the cornmeal. Now I'm taking it into my spider. At the 18th century, they would have cooked this in lard, but obviously today's lifestyle, we don't cook in lard, we cook in vegetable oil. You want them crunchy on the outside, but you really want to make sure that the inside of the oyster is still nice and moist, like so. Perfect. Perfect. I'll tell you, nothing better than 18th century cooking, especially if you have oysters this way. Spectacular. 18th century at its best. One of the greatest things in the 18th century was their innovativeness for garnishing their food. We take for granted today, we have airplanes, we have freezers, we have grocery stores everywhere. The 18th century chef had to be very innovative. One of the innovations that I found in my research was that leeks would winter very well. So what they would do, they would leave the leeks on the garden, harvested when needed. And what they would do then, you just cut it into small strips like so, and you take the white part because the green part gets a little bit too bitter. So you take the white part of the leek and just cut it down. I'll take another piece over here. And here we go. Just chilling it down, and then basically you have your same oil, obviously they used larding, but we use oil that you used earlier for frying the oyster. And all you want to do is add the leeks into the tempered oil. Okay, when the leeks are done, and if they're wet, and you want to not have a fire at home, if you do this recipe, just rub in a little towel, get the extra moisture off, that might be helpful. And then basically just going to add it into the oil. So it doesn't take long at all. You want to actually be very careful in it. It's not a time to take a break. And then basically look at it. It takes no time at all. And voila, it's already done. Here we go. Imagine the 18th century, late winter, just before spring. They must have been very desperate at the time to have anything green. All right, the next thing we're going to do is a lot of people refer to as Pennsylvania Dutch. Pennsylvania Dutch, obviously, in several of my books, and everybody knows how to make a pasta dough. It's basically straightforward, a pasta dough, that all you're going to do is a little flour on your board. You want to make it ahead of time anyway, because the dough should sit up a little bit, because the dough, if it's too fresh, it wouldn't roll out on you. Take a rolling pin and just roll it over. There's several ways of doing it. For this particular recipe, I prefer it more as a dumpling style, if you call it, than as a noodle. In the restaurant, however, we serve noodles because most people are not familiar with a dumpling style noodle like this one here. So all of this, just like so, and I go, cut it over, big strips like so, and then go across. And the next step will go, I go right behind me, my water is boiling, they go right into the water. Remember, those are not the regular egg noodles that you air dry, you just want to have them fresh. Basically the dumpling style, which is not really as a noodle, more as a dumpling, you want to keep them in nice big chunks, like you see me doing here. It's more of a dumpling than it's ever a noodle, but it's also referred to as Pennsylvania Dutch noodles. I'm just adding it in the boiling water, and they'll take really no time at all. Let me check one more time really quick. I want to make sure that those my dumplings will come nice, which they are. Stir it up a little bit. Yeah, beautiful. Really nice. Perfect. You're going to see the moment they swim, they're almost done, which you can see already there. Soft vegetables, which we refer to, would be yellow squash and zucchini, which obviously have been around in the 18th century, but, there comes the big but. In the winter time, you would have not seen those. But in spring, late spring and summer, obviously abundance. So this is a very simple. We're going to take just a zucchini and just cut it across, really a rough cut. Just rough, 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 rough. There's nothing fine about it. There we go. Do the same thing with the yellow squash. Same thing here. Go cut it across. Same thing here. Some red cabbage that I already cut before. There we go. I take a little bit of butter. I'll bring the spider right up. Here, put the butter in the spider. Put the vegetable right into it, including my red cabbage. I put salt and pepper into it, that's all it needs. Salt or white pepper. Bring it back on the fire. And all I do now, the thing we want to play last moment, heirloom tomatoes that Thomas Jefferson made famous when he was president, serving it to everybody. Single-handedly, he was responsible for the tomato to become part of our culture. And I take some heirloom tomato. In this particular recipe, I do not deseed them. Many times you deseed it. This time I wouldn't. I just cut it like rough chunks like so. But remember, you want to use a nice heirloom for that. If you get them now readily available, all specialty stores have it. It's real easy. They're a little costly, but they have tremendous flavor. They come in different variety of colors as well. Just chop it up like so. And then I get ready to plate the Mother Washington-inspired turkey stew. And she was quite a lady in her days. As you can tell by the snow caverns, I'm here at Valley Forge National Historical Park, the place that George Washington made his headquarters, and most likely the revolution was decided right here on this very grounds. I'm honored to have Patricia Brady with me today, distinguished author who wrote a spectacular book on Mother Washington's and American life and helped me so much in my research.
Well, Valley Forge is just, as you say, the place where the revolution was essentially won. And Martha Washington was here for that whole bad winter.
Which brings me to my first questions. Why would she leave her beautiful home in Virginia, the nice estate, and come here be crammed into a little thing with soldiers?
Because she loved her husband. She was rich. She was the big catch. She wanted George Washington.
Oh.
And whenever he said, come join me at camp, she was on her way.
Sometimes I think I know Mother Washington because I've been reading and studying her recipes for so many years. The sophistication Mother Washington brought to the early American culinary scene.
She was a notable hostess. Not only did she have wonderful recipes that were quite sophisticated and went together very well, but they had good wine and the conversation flowed. That was what she was known for, talking and making people feel part of things.
Well, I understand through your book also that her dining table was also to strategize the next day's event, so having 20, 25 people was the norm, I guess.
It was living here in camp with all the young aides-de-camp. It was something like being a fraternity house mother.
Sure.
She had all these young men to look after, then all the other generals, their wives, foreign dignitaries, congressmen come to snoop around. They sat and talked about, okay, what happens when spring comes? How do we actually win this thing?
Well, they won it because they hired von Steuben. That's obvious to me.
The German speaks.
A fellow German, but
the
of course.
German speaks. Martha Washington was the secret weapon of the American Revolution. Every winter when she arrived, the soldiers cheered. They were so excited that Lady Washington was here. And she set up a home for George Washington. He liked his home better than anybody, and he wanted this quiet, peaceful place. Don't forget, Valley Forge was not out in the wilderness.
No.
Valley Forge was among all kinds of farmsteads and all, and so the neighbors would come to visit.
So interesting sometimes when you look back to the little things that we don't really take it for granted today, but it was a very important part of winning this war. All the things I do with my food is trying to show the audience what really happened, and food and history is all intertwined. Food is history.
It's, as your title says, taste history.
Yep. I always call her, she was the first lady, no pun intended, that really did unbelievable things with her recipes, like so many of the dishes that I make constantly. Mind-boggling, you know?
Well, it's also part of the job of First Lady as being the hostess
Correct.
of the nation,
Yep.
that her style of cooking was really quite new to some of the men from other colonies who came and ate at the table.
Sure. When I make it today, it raises eyebrows. And you could serve it in any French restaurant or continental restaurant any given day. So I stoke my fire to make sure it's nice and hot. When the noodles are cooking, like that, they float. You see that? I'll just take them and put them on a serving platter. Now, if you would do this at a later time, and say you make this ready for a company you have over at your house and you want to recreate this dish, then I would chuck them in cold water, set them aside, and then later reconstitute them really quick. So basically, this is how the noodles would be. 18th century, I tell you. I'm going to go back over here. I'm finishing my vegetables. All I want to put there with the fresh cut tomatoes under the last moment. And all I want to do is just saute them up a little bit. Okay, let it sit here for 1 second. I have the Turkish stew. The dumplings are on the bottom. I've just placed the Turkish stew right on the center. Remember, 18th century was all about family style eating, not individual plates. So it's very common that you find them to be served on a platter style. So basically it would be like so. Now comes the pièce de résistance, which would be the oysters that we fried earlier. Lay them right next to it, but like that, like so. Then I'm going to get some of my vegetables that I sauteed on top. I take them and put them right on top of the plate. Like about so. The next thing we do is we're going to have the leek that we fried already. Put the fried leeks right on top. Right on top. Then we're going to garnish this whole place with the parsley we chopped already a little bit. This is kind of the dish that inspired by Mother Washington that would have been served like this in the 18th century. After Valley Forge, Patricia and I went to the city tavern to warm up and chat some more. Why Mother Washington?
I realized she actually wasn't born 65 years old. And then I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to find out what she was like as a young woman? When George Washington came courting to the widow Martha Custis, who at that time was 26 years old, he saw a beautiful woman and she saw a gorgeous man. She could have married anybody. She had several other suitors at the same time, but with her money and her appeal, her beauty, she chose him. And she never changed her mind. She adored him, and he returned it.
The cover of the book, it's obviously a painting. Do we know exactly when it was painted and where it is now today?
Yes. I did not want to use the same old elderly Martha Washington with the mull cap on. I wanted to say, who was this young woman that George Washington met? And what sparked what happened then? And so the Faces Lab at LSU, they did an age regression for me. And then the publisher liked it so much, they hired a New Orleans artist to paint the portrait.
Why do you think that the legacy has kind of changed after the death of Mother and George?
It was the 19th century. Writers and historians of that time had what they considered the proper image for our founding father and founding mother. You know, think of the cherry tree. Think of all those foolish things that were written. Those were all made up. You have to strip off all those layers that were put on in the 19th century and find your way through the lies and get back to the truth.
So you have the dumplings, you have the Turkish stew, you got the fried oysters, you got the soft vegetables sauteed, and you have the leeks on top. The flavor of this dish, I will tell you, is sensational because you have all the different combinations of vegetables. Oh yeah, so much flavor, so much goodness in this dish that really inspires and really represents the best the 18th century had to offer. So here you go, Martha Washington's Turkish stew, fried oyster, dumpling, fried leek, and vegetable.